Let's have some more analysis now. Let's bring in the Hill.com staff writer, Cheyanne M. It's great to have you with me today. I want to start with the president's comments this morning saying, I don't know, when asked if he needed to actually uphold the Constitution and that, in fact, his lawyers were the ones that were handling things, that were in charge here. How do you think the American people react when they hear the president say something like this, something that most people would argue is black and white in our Constitution?
Yeah, I think that it totally depends what side of the aisle you're on, right? A lot of the president's supporters are going to applaud the president for trying to take a stand and trying to say, I'm not a lawyer. I shouldn't be talking about what is and isn't constitutional. While on the other hand, I'm sure that from Democrats, we're here, as the president, your job is to uphold the Constitution. You swore an oath to uphold the Constitution. And so I think that in some ways, for some folks, it is alarming. And then for other folks, it's sort of still in line with what we're used to hearing from the president. Right? A little bit of nonchalance when it comes to things like the Constitution that he says that he respects, he says that he wants to uphold, but at the same time, he has his own views on how the Constitution should be interpreted.
Right. Just depends on who you're asking. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the possibility of Trump in 2028. We've seen the hats, but the president has been seen waving them around even on the White House lawn. President Trump himself acknowledging this morning that, of course, people want him to do it. We've heard those echoes. But he also told Meet the Press that it's maybe not something that he actually wants to do. Do you see him making a third run? Do you believe him when he says that it's not something that interests him?
This is a sort of talking point that he's going to try to keep going for as long as he wants, right? The president loves to have the speculation out there. He loves to make sure that folks are talking about him, whether it's about what his future holds or what he can do for America. I think that in order for him to really seek a third term, he knows that he would have to find some way to convince Congress that there needs to be an exemption somehow for him, because as we know, when it comes to the Constitution, it says 2 years or 2 terms for a president, right? So, but then it goes back to that point where we were just talking about with what parts of the Constitution do and don't apply to the president, kind of up to him. But I think this is something very exciting for his supporters. They want him to seek another term. And that's not entirely unheard of, even when it comes to previous presidents, right? I mean, how many folks have we heard talk about, for instance, FDR, even former President Obama, where folks are like, oh, we'd love to see you back in the White House. So kind of one of those things where his supporters are definitely gung-ho for it.
Right. All right, let's talk about the economy. We have a new poll that came out from Decision Desk HQ, which partners with NewsNation. They show that 53% of Americans say the economy is worse off. Obviously, we know this was a huge point for voters back in November. So if things don't change, number one, what would that mean for those Republicans out there seeking election that are trying to earn back the trust of their constituents? And two, what do you think is the overall timeline that the president has right now, his administration has, in actually righting this ship before Americans and his Republicans at Capitol Hill turn on him too?
This is a startling number that we're seeing right here, especially when the president campaigned on promising to make the economy better for America, right? And so the Republicans really have a very short period of time here. We know midterm campaigning is just about to kick off. I know it still seems like 2026 is far away, but we're about to see that campaigning get underway. And they have to find some way to tell voters, if they want to maintain control of both the House and the Senate, that something is going to happen, something is going to change. One of those, of course, we have to talk about the tariffs, we have to talk about inflation and where it still stands, and the fact that many Americans don't feel that the economy is working for them right now, right? Many people are still worried about the cost of gas, the cost of eggs, these things that we've heard the president say he is working to tackle. But Republicans really have to find something concrete and substantial that they can point to if they want to maintain control of Congress.
Okay, that's Cheyanne Daniels. Thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.